This is where you get off. Those 6 words hit me harder than the cold rain falling on the desolate Ohio road. My son Lucas did not shout them. He said them with a chilling calmness as he put the car in park, unlocking the doors with a hollow click that sounded like a gun cocking. I looked at him confused, clutching the funeral program with my wife Martha's picture on it. But he refused to meet my eyes. Then my daughter-in-law Monica turned from the front seat, lowered her sunglasses, and gave me a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. "Get out, Harrison," she spat. "We are done babysitting." I stood in the mud watching the taillights of my own Lincoln Navigator fade into the mist, realizing that on the day I buried my wife, my only son had just buried me alive. But as the cold seeped into my bones, a strange fire ignited in my chest. They thought they had taken my house. They thought they had stolen my business. But they had no idea that for 20 years I had been preparing for a war I hoped would never come, and the company they just stole. It was nothing but a trap. My name is Harrison Bennett. I am 70 years old, and I spent 40 years building Bennett Logistics from a single rusted pickup truck into a statewide trucking empire. I thought I was building a legacy for my family. I was wrong. If you have ever felt the sting of betrayal from the people who were supposed to love you the most, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss how I taught them a lesson they will never forget. And tell me in the comments, what would you do if your own child left you on the side of the road with nothing? I read every single comment. It started less than an hour after we lowered Martha into the ground. The rain had been relentless all morning, turning the cemetery grounds into a gray, weeping landscape that matched the hole in my chest. I felt hollowed out. Martha had been my anchor, my compass, my business partner, and my best friend for 45 years. Without her, the world seemed out of focus. I climbed into the back seat of the black Lincoln Navigator, my legs feeling heavy and useless. This was my car, the one I bought for retirement trips we would never take, but today Lucas was driving. Lucas sat in the driver's seat, his knuckles white as he gripped the leather steering wheel. He adjusted the rearview mirror, but I noticed he angled it specifically so he would not have to look at me. Beside him sat Monica. She was dressed in a black designer dress that probably cost more than my first truck. She had not shed a single tear during the service. Not one. Now she was furiously typing on her phone, the clicking of her acrylic nails against the screen filling the tense silence of the cabin. I leaned my head back against the seat, closing my eyes, waiting for the engine to start. I just wanted to go home. I wanted to sit in Martha's favorite armchair, smell the lingering scent of her lavender perfume, and try to figure out how to exist in a house that was now just a building. The car moved smoothly onto the highway. The silence stretched thick and suffocating. I cleared my throat, needing to break the tension, needing some connection with the only family I had left. "It was a beautiful service," I said, my voice raspy and weak. "Your mother would have liked the flowers. The lilies were her favorite." From the front passenger seat, Monica let out a sharp, exasperated sigh. She did not turn around. She just held up a hand, palm facing me, silencing me like an unruly child. "Harrison, please," she said, her tone sharp. "I am handling urgent emails. We do not need the commentary right now." I blinked, stung. I looked at the back of Lucas's head, waiting for him to defend me or at least acknowledge his wife's rudeness. But he said nothing. He just turned up the radio, slightly drowning out the sound of the rain with low hum of jazz music. I sank deeper into my coat. Maybe they were just grieving, I told myself. Grief makes people act strangely. Grief makes people snap. I needed to be patient. I needed to be the father. We drove for 20 minutes in that oppressive silence. I watched the rain streak against the tinted windows, blurring the world outside. I expected Lucas to take the exit for Oakwood Hills, the neighborhood where our family estate had stood for 30 years. But the blinker did not come on. The Lincoln sped past the exit. I sat up straighter, confused. "Lucas," I said, leaning forward slightly. You missed the exit, son. The house is back that way. Lucas did not answer immediately. He kept his eyes fixed on the road, the wipers slapping a rhythmic beat against the glass. Shortcut, he finally muttered. There is construction on the main road. I frowned. I knew these roads better than the lines on my own hands. I had driven trucks on every inch of asphalt in Ohio. There was no construction on the main road, and there was certainly no shortcut this way. We were heading west toward the old industrial quarry and the abandoned farmlands. It was a dead zone, a place where people went to dump old appliances or do things they did not want seen. A cold prickle of unease started at the base of my neck. The gut feeling. It was the same instinct that had saved me from bad business deals and dangerous routes in my trucking days. Something was wrong. Lucas, I said, my voice firmer this time. Where are we going? This isn't the way home. Monica turned around then. She lowered her sunglasses, revealing eyes that were dry and hard as flint. We are taking a detour, Harrison. Just sit back and relax. You are always so anxious. It is bad for your blood pressure. Her voice was patronizing, dripping with fake concern, but her eyes were cold. I looked at Lucas again. I saw a bead of sweat trickling down his temple despite the air conditioning in the car blasting cold air. He looked terrified, but resolved. My son, the boy I had taught to throw a baseball, the man I had given a vice president title he had barely earned, looked like he was about to be sick. The car slowed down as the asphalt turned to gravel. We were miles from the city now. The trees here were skeletal, overgrown, looming over the road like cage bars. There were no streetlights, just the gray afternoon gloom and the endless rain. Lucas pulled the car onto a muddy shoulder near a rusted chain-link fence that marked the edge of the old quarry. He put the car in park. The locks clicked open. The sound was deafening in the quiet cabin. This is it, Lucas said. His voice was devoid of emotion, robotic. This is what I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. Why are we stopping here? Is something wrong with the engine? Lucas took a deep breath, gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned yellow, and finally looked at me in the rearview mirror. His eyes were empty. No, Dad. This is where you get off. I stared at him, my brain refusing to process the words. I let out a nervous, confused chuckle. What are you talking about? Stop joking, Lucas. Take me home. I am tired. I am not joking, he said, turning in his seat to face me properly for the first time. Get out of the car. Before I could react, I heard the trunk pop open. Monica opened her door and stepped out into the rain with an umbrella. She walked to the back of the car. I heard the thud of something heavy hitting the wet ground. I opened my door and stepped out the mud, instantly soaking my dress shoes. The cold wind bit through my suit jacket. I walked to the back of the car and saw my old leather travel bag lying in a puddle. It was the bag I used for short business trips. It was bulging, packed full. I looked up at Monica. She was standing under her umbrella, looking at me like I was a stray dog she had finally managed to shake off. What is this? I asked, my voice trembling, with a mixture of rage and disbelief. Why is my bag here? Because you do not live with us anymore, Monica said, shouting over the sound of the rain. We packed your things this morning while you were at the funeral home viewing the body. We are doing you a favor, really. Lucas stepped out of the driver's side but stayed by the door, using the car as a shield between us. Dad, look, he started, his voice cracking. It is just, Mom is gone. The house is too much work. The business needs young blood. We cannot take care of you. Take care of me, I roared, straightening my back. I am 70 years old, not an invalid. I run a company. I pay your salary, Lucas. Not anymore, Monica interjected, stepping closer, her heels sinking into the soft earth. Lucas filed the paperwork this morning. You are incompetent, Harrison. Grief-stricken, unstable. We have witnesses who saw you shouting at the nurses in the hospital. We have the power of attorney. I felt the blood drain from my face. The power of attorney. I remembered signing a stack of documents days ago when Martha was in hospice when I was blinded by tears and exhaustion. Lucas had told me they were insurance forms. You tricked me, I whispered, looking at my son. You used your mother's death to trick me. Lucas looked away, shame flickering across his face for a second, before he hardened his expression again. It is business, Dad. You always said business requires tough decisions. Well, this is a tough decision. We are selling the house. The locks were changed an hour ago. Your key cards for the office have been deactivated. He got back into the car. Monica followed, collapsing her umbrella and tossing it into the passenger seat. Wait, I shouted, lunging for the door handle. You cannot do this. This is my life. Where am I supposed to go? Lucas revved the engine. The window rolled down just an inch. Find a motel, Dad, or a shelter. You have your Social Security. You are a survivor, right? That is what you always bragged about. So survive. And with that, the Lincoln peeled away, tires spinning in the gravel, spraying mud all over my black funeral suit. I stood there in the middle of nowhere, rain mixing with the hot tears of rage on my face, watching the only family I had left disappear into the gray mist. I was alone. I had no phone. They had taken it from the center console. I had no car. I had no home. But as I looked down at my muddy shoes clutching the bag that held the scraps of my life, I did not just feel despair. I felt a cold, hard resolve tightening in my chest. Lucas thought he had taken everything. He thought he had won. But he forgot one thing. He forgot who taught him how to play the game. And he had absolutely no idea about the trust fund I had set up in 1995, a secret legal clause that was about to turn his victory into a nightmare. He wanted a war. He just started one. The silence that followed the roar of the Lincoln's engine was heavier than anything I had ever felt. It was a physical weight pressing down on my chest, competing with the icy rain that soaked through my funeral suit in seconds. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty road where my life had just disappeared. My hands instinctively went to my pockets. I needed to call someone. I needed to fix this. But my fingers brushed against empty lining. My phone was gone. Lucas had taken it from the center console earlier, saying I needed a break from the condolence calls. A break. It was a calculated move. I was standing in the middle of nowhere, miles from the nearest town, without a lifeline. I checked my inner jacket pocket and found my wallet. I opened it with trembling fingers, protecting it from the rain with my body. $40 in cash. 2 20s. And my platinum credit card. That was it. That was the sum total of Harrison Bennett's existence in that moment. I looked down at my shoes. They were Italian leather, hand-stitched, meant for boardrooms and galas, not for mud and gravel. I grabbed the handle of my heavy leather bag, the one Monica had packed with God knows what, and I started to walk. I had no direction, just away. Away from the quarry. Away from the shame. The first hour was fueled by adrenaline and rage. I marched muttering curses, replaying the look in Monica's eyes. But by the second hour, the reality of my age set in. I am 70 years old. My knees began to ache with a sharp, grinding pain. The wet wool of my suit became a heavy, suffocating skin. Every step sent a shockwave of agony through my feet, as the thin soles of my shoes offered no protection against the jagged stones of the road shoulder. Cars passed occasionally, their headlights cutting through the gloom. I tried to wave to signal for help, but they just sped up. To them, I was not a businessman in distress. I was a soaking wet, disheveled old man wandering the highway at dusk. I was a threat. I was a vagrant. I saw a family in a minivan slow down, a child pressing their face to the glass, before the father swerved away, accelerating into the night. That rejection stung more than the cold. By the fourth hour, I was no longer walking. I was shuffling. My feet were raw, the blisters popping and bleeding into my socks. I was shivering so violently my teeth clattered together. I had to stop every few hundred yards to lean against a fence post or a tree, gasping for air, my heart fluttering in a way that terrified me. I thought about just lying down in the tall grass. It would be so easy to just stop, to close my eyes and let the hypothermia take the pain away. But then I saw it. A faint flickering neon sign in the distance. A gas station. It was a beacon in the darkness. I forced my legs to move, focusing on that light, putting one painful foot in front of the other. When I finally pushed open the glass door of the station, a bell jingled, a cheerful sound that felt mocking in my current state. The warmth of the store hit me and I almost collapsed. I stumbled to the counter, dripping water onto the linoleum floor. The clerk, a young man with piercings and a bored expression, looked up from his magazine. He didn't offer help. He just eyed me with suspicion, his hand drifting towards something under the counter. "I need to use the phone," I rasped, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. "Please." "Payphone is outside," he grunted, pointing to the corner of the building. I nodded, too exhausted to argue, and went back out into the cold. I fumbled with the quarters from my pocket, my fingers numb and clumsy. I dialed my home number first, the number I had called every day for 30 years. It rang once, twice. Then a busy signal. The rapid, harsh tone beeped in my ear. I hung up and tried again. Busy. They had taken the phone off the hook. Or maybe they were already celebrating. I took a deep breath and pulled out my credit card. I needed a hotel. I needed a taxi. I dialed the customer service number on the back of the card, shivering as the wind whipped around the corner of the building. "Welcome to American Express," the automated voice said. "Please enter your card number." I punched in the digits. There was a pause. Then a human operator came on the line. "Security department. This is Sarah." "Can I have your name, please?" "Harrison Bennett," I said, leaning my forehead against the cold metal of the phone box. "My card isn't working. I need to authorize a transaction, Mr. Bennett." The woman's voice was professional but guarded. "I see here that this card was reported lost or stolen 3 hours ago. We have locked the account for your protection." "Stolen," I almost shouted. "I am holding the card right now." "It is not stolen, my son. There has been a mistake. You need to reactivate it immediately." "I am stranded." "I cannot do that, sir," she replied. The report came from an authorized user on the account, a Mr. Lucas Bennett. He stated that the card was taken during a mugging. "We have already issued a new card to the home address. Is there anything else I can help you with?" I hung up the phone, the receiver slipping from my hand and dangling by its metal cord. A mugging. Lucas had thought of everything. He hadn't just kicked me out. He had severed my arteries. He knew I had the card, so he killed it before I could use it. I had one option left. I reached into my wallet and pulled out a small, waterlogged address book. I turned the pages until I found the number for Robert Sterling. Robert was my oldest friend. He sat on the board of directors of Bennett Logistics. He was the godfather to my son. We played golf every Sunday. If anyone could help me, if anyone would listen to reason and come pick me up, it was Robert. I inserted my last few quarters. The phone rang. "Hello," Robert's voice was warm, familiar. "Robert, it is Harrison," I said, relief flooding through me. "You have to help me. Lucas has gone crazy. He left me on the side of the road. He took my phone. I am at a gas station on Route 9. Please, you have to come get me." There was a silence on the other end, a long, heavy silence that made my stomach turn. "Harrison," Robert said, but the warmth was gone. His voice was cold, distant. Lucas called me. He told me what happened after the funeral. What happened? I asked, confused. He threw me out of the car, Robert. He told me about the episode. Harrison. Robert said, his tone turning stern. He said you got violent, that you attacked Monica in the car because you were confused. He said you were screaming about people stealing the company. Attacked her, I stammered. I never touched her. I was sitting in the back seat. Lucas said you are having a breakdown, Harrison. Grief psychosis, he called it. He said he tried to take you to a facility, but you ran off into the woods. He is worried sick. He told us if you called, we shouldn't engage, that we should encourage you to seek professional help. Robert. Listen to me, I shouted, desperation clawing at my throat. That is a lie. He is trying to steal the company. He and Monica, they planned this. Stop it, Harrison, Robert snapped. You sound paranoid, just like he said you would. Look, I cannot get involved in this. Go to the hospital. Get some help. Do not call this number again until you are stable. Click. The line went dead. I stood there in the rain, holding the dead phone, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly small. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was an assassination. Lucas hadn't just stolen my house and my money. He had murdered my reputation. He had poisoned the well before I could even take a sip. To the world, to my friends, to the board, I wasn't the victim. I was a violent, senile old man who had lost his mind with grief. I looked at my reflection in the glass of the phone booth. My hair was plastered to my skull. My eyes were wild and red-rimmed. My expensive suit was ruined with mud. I looked exactly like the crazy person Lucas said I was. I hung up the phone. I picked up my bag. I had $40. I had no friends. I had no name. But as I walked away from that phone, a cold, hard clarity settled over me. They wanted me to be crazy. They wanted me to disappear. They thought they had cut off all my exits, but they forgot that a man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous man in the world. I walked toward the motel sign flickering down the road. I would survive this night, and tomorrow I would start fighting back. The neon sign of the Motel 6 buzzed with a sound like a dying insect flickering a sickly pink light over the wet pavement. I pushed open the heavy glass door, the smell of stale cigarette smoke and industrial cleaner hitting me instantly. It was a smell of desperation of people passing through who had nowhere else to go. I walked to the bulletproof glass window. The night clerk did not even look up from his phone. I slid two $20 bills under the slot. A room, I said. My voice was rough, like gravel. He took the money, slid a plastic keycard back, and pointed to the stairs outside. Second floor. Room 204. No refunds. Checkout is at 11. I took the card. That was it. My entire net worth $40 traded for a few hours of shelter. I walked back out into the rain and climbed the concrete stairs. Room 204 was exactly what I expected. The carpet was sticky. The wallpaper was peeling at the corners. There was a single bed with a thin polyester bedspread that looked like it had not been washed in a decade. I locked the door and slid the chain into place. It was a flimsy piece of metal, but it was the only barrier between me and the rest of the world. I stripped off my ruined suit jacket and hung it over the back of the single wooden chair. My shirt was plastered to my skin, cold and clammy. I sat on the edge of the bed, the springs groaning in protest. I was shivering a deep, bone-rattling cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. My stomach growled a sharp, twisting pain. I had not eaten since breakfast. I closed my eyes and for a second I could smell it. The rich, savory scent of Martha's pot roast. I could see her standing in our kitchen wearing her favorite yellow apron, pulling the roasting pan out of the oven. "Dinner is ready." "Harry," she would say, her smile lighting up the room. "Wash your hands." The memory was so vivid, so real, that when I opened my eyes and saw the stained walls of the motel room, the grief hit me like a physical blow. I curled up on the bed, pulling my knees to my chest, trying to preserve whatever body heat I had left. I was 70 years old. I was sleeping in my clothes in a roadside motel, and my wife was gone. The loneliness was a living thing, a shadow sitting in the corner of the room watching me. I needed noise. I needed something to drown out the sound of the rain and my own thoughts. I reached for the remote control on the bedside table. It was taped together with duct tape. I pointed it at the old box television bolted to the dresser. The screen flickered to life, the picture grainy and washed out. It was the local business news channel. I watched mindlessly as stock tickers scrolled across the bottom of the screen. I was about to change the channel to find anything else when a familiar logo flashed on the screen. A blue truck with a silver wing. Bennett Logistics. My company. I sat up, ignoring the stiffness in my joints. The anchor woman, a blonde woman with a serious expression, was speaking over a graphic of my company's headquarters. In breaking news tonight, she said Bennett Logistics has announced a major restructuring plan following the sudden passing of co-founder Martha Bennett. The screen cut to a pre-recorded clip. It was Lucas, my son. He was standing on the steps of the office building, wearing a sharp navy suit, looking every inch the grieving but capable heir. He looked into the camera, his face composed, his eyes dry. "It is a difficult time for our family," Lucas said smoothly into the microphones. "But my father, Harrison, has decided to step back from the day-to-day operations to focus on his health and mourning. He has entrusted me to lead Bennett Logistics into a new era." "Liar," I whispered at the screen. "You stole it." But the news anchor continued, and what she said next made my blood run cold. Industry insiders suggest this restructuring is the first step in a controversial merger with Apex Corporation. Sources say the deal, valued at $50 million, could be finalized as early as this week. Apex Corporation. The name hit me like a taser. I scrambled off the bed and stood right in front of the TV, staring at the screen in horror. No, not Apex. Anyone but them. For 20 years, Apex had been my shadow, my dark reflection. They were a logistics company in name only. Everyone in the industry knew what they really moved. They cut corners on safety. They falsified driver logs. There were rumors, always unproven but persistent, about smuggling rings moving through their distribution centers. Their CEO, a man named Victor Krell, was a shark who had tried to buy me out 5 times. Each time I had told him to get off my property. I told him I would burn my trucks before I let his dirty money touch my business. And now Lucas was selling to him. I understood it all in a flash. The rush to get power of attorney, the isolation, the story about me being crazy. Lucas wasn't just greedy, he was desperate. You don't sell to Apex unless you need fast cash and don't care where it comes from. He was selling my life's work, my legacy, and Martha's name to a chop shop of a company that would strip it for parts and use our roots for God knows what illegal filth. The despair I had felt minutes ago began to evaporate. It burned away, replaced by a heat that started in my gut and spread to my fingertips. It was rage, pure white-hot rage. They thought I was a feeble old man. They thought I was just a hurdle to be removed. Lucas thought he could erase me, put me in a box, and hand the keys to the castle over to criminals. He thought the grief would break me. I walked into the tiny, moldy bathroom. I turned on the faucet. The water came out brown at first, then cleared. I splashed it onto my face, the cold shock clearing the fog from my brain. I looked up at the mirror. The man staring back was old. His eyes were red-rimmed. His hair was a mess. He looked like a ghost. But then I leaned closer. I looked deep into my own eyes. I saw the man who had driven 18-wheelers through blizzards to make a delivery. I saw the man who had stared down union busters and corrupt inspectors. I saw Harrison Bennett. I grabbed the hand towel and wiped my face, scrubbing hard, as if I could scrub away the victim I had been for the last 6 hours. I straightened my spine. The pain in my knees was still there, but I pushed it aside. "You made a mistake, Lucas," I said to the empty room. My voice was low, steady, and dangerous. "You can kick me out of my house. You can take my car. But you do not get to sell your mother's legacy to vultures. Not while I am still breathing." I walked back into the bedroom and turned off the TV. The silence returned, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was the silence before a storm. I had no phone. I had no money. But I had information. And I had a secret weapon that Lucas in his arrogance had completely forgotten about. I sat down on the edge of the bed not to sleep, but to plan. Tomorrow I wasn't just going to survive. I was going to war. The diner smelled of burnt coffee and old grease, a scent that usually comforted me but now just made my empty stomach turn. I sat in the corner booth, the vinyl cracked and taped over, clutching a styrofoam cup of water because I couldn't afford anything else. I kept my head down, watching the door, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Every time a car slowed down outside, I flinched, expecting to see a police cruiser or Lucas's black SUV. I had used my last 3/4 at the payphone outside. I had called the one number I still knew by heart, the one person who had stood beside me in the trenches of business for 2 decades. Patty Higgins. She picked up on the second ring. When she heard my voice, she didn't ask if I was crazy. She didn't tell me to seek help. She just asked where I was. 10 minutes later, a beat-up sedan pulled into the gravel lot. Patty stepped out. She was 65, retired, with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, but her eyes were sharp as ever. She spotted me through the window and rushed inside. When she saw me, my muddy suit, my unshaven face, the sheer exhaustion etched into my skin, she stopped dead. Her hands flew to her mouth, and I saw tears well up in her eyes. She didn't say a word. She just walked over, pulled me up from the booth, and hugged me so hard I thought my ribs would crack. It was the first human warmth I had felt since Martha died. "Come on," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We cannot stay here. It is not safe." She drove me to her place, a small bungalow on the edge of town. But she didn't take me to the front door. She drove around the back through the tall grass to an old garden shed covered in ivy. It was hidden from the road, invisible to anyone passing by. Inside it was clean and dry, smelling of potting soil and lavender. She set up a cot for me, brought me a heavy blanket and a thermos of hot soup. I sat on the edge of the cot, the warmth of the soup finally stopping the shivering that had plagued me for hours. Patty sat on an overturned crate opposite me, clutching a manila folder to her chest. She looked terrified, but determined. "I knew he was up to something," she said, her voice low. "I tried to visit you after the funeral, Harrison. Monica wouldn't let me pass the gate. She said you were sedated. She said you didn't want to see anyone." "They took everything, Patty," I said, my voice raspy. "My house, my accounts. They left me on the side of the road like garbage." "I know," she said, "and I know why." She opened the folder and spread the papers out on the small potting table. They were bank statements, detailed transaction logs from the company's internal accounts. I frowned. Patty had been retired for 5 years. "How did she have these? I still have friends in payroll," she said, answering my unspoken question. "Good people. They saw things that didn't add up. They made copies. Look at this." I put on my reading glasses, the one thing Lucas hadn't managed to steal, and looked at the numbers. My blood ran cold. The emergency fund. The reserve I had built over 40 years to protect the company from recession or disaster. It had over $2 million in it when Martha got sick. "It is gone, Harrison," Patty said softly. "Look at the dates." I traced the lines with a shaking finger. Withdrawals. Massive ones. Starting the week Martha went into hospice. 50,000 here, 100,000 there. In 3 months, Lucas had drained the account dry. $2 million vanished into thin air. "Where did it go?" I asked, looking up at her. "Did he invest it? Did he buy new trucks? Patty shook her head grimly. She pointed to a column of repeated transactions labeled VIP consulting services. I checked the routing numbers, she said. It is a shell company in Las Vegas. Harrison, it is an online gambling syndicate. Lucas isn't investing. He is betting. He is losing thousands of dollars a day on sports. I felt sick. My son. My legacy. He was gambling it away while his mother lay dying. And this, I pointed to another set of charges labeled public relations expenses. Patty let out a bitter laugh. PR expenses. That is what they call it. I cross-referenced the merchant codes. That is Chanel, Gucci, high-end jewelers in New York. Monica has been using the company credit line as her personal piggy bank. They are gutting it, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. They aren't just selling the company. They are stripping it for parts before they hand it over. They need the sale to Apex to cover the hole they dug. I stood up, pacing the small shed. I have to stop them. I have to go to the police. This is embezzlement. This is fraud. With what lawyer? Patty asked, her voice sharp but sad. Harrison, sit down. Think. You have no money. You have no phone. You have been declared mentally incompetent by a doctor. Lucas paid off. If you walk into a police station right now looking like this, raving about millions of dollars, they will lock you up. Lucas controls the narrative. He controls the assets. You are a ghost. Well, I slumped back onto the cot, defeat washing over me. So that is it. I just watched them destroy everything Martha and I built. Patty looked at me for a long moment. The rain drummed against the metal roof of the shed. She reached into the folder and pulled out one last document. It was old, the paper yellowed at the edges. It was the original company charter from 1995. You cannot sue him, she said slowly. Not right now. You cannot fight him in court because he has bought the judge and jury. But you built this company, Harrison. You wrote the rules. And unless my memory is failing me, you wrote a failsafe into the bylaws 20 years ago that Lucas probably never even bothered to read. I looked at the document, and a memory flickered in the darkness of my mind. The veto clause. Unless Patty continued tapping the paper, we can prove that the sale to Apex is invalid. Unless we can get to the one thing that overrides his signature, the biometric seal. And unless you are willing to break into your own house to get it. The office of Catherine Ross was nothing like the glass and steel fortress where Lucas was currently selling my life's work. It was tucked away on the second floor of a brick building in the old district right above a bakery that filled the stairwell with the scent of yeast and sugar. The sign on the door was simple frosted glass, but when I walked inside, the air smelled of old paper and fierce determination. Catherine stood up from behind her desk. She was 35 with sharp eyes that softened the moment she saw me. She looked so much like her father, my old friend Jim, that for a second I forgot I was a homeless man wearing a muddy suit. She did not look at my stained clothes or my unshaven face. She looked at me with the same respect she had shown when she was a teenager, asking for advice on law school applications. Mr. Bennett, she said, coming around the desk to take my hand. Patty told me everything. I am so sorry about Martha, and I am sorry about what is happening. I do not have any money, Catherine. I said, my voice thick with shame. I cannot pay a retainer. My accounts are frozen. My cards are dead. I am a ghost. She shook her head, guiding me to a chair. You paid for my father's funeral when he died without insurance, Harrison. You paid for my first semester of law school anonymously, though I always knew it was you. You do not pay here. Not today. Not ever. Now sit down. Let's look at this mess. Patty laid the stolen documents on the desk. Catherine put on her glasses and went to work. For an hour, the only sound in the room was the rustling of paper and the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. I watched her face looking for a flicker of hope, but her expression grew darker with every page she turned. "This is bad, Harrison," she said finally, leaning back and rubbing her temples. "Lucas has been thorough. He has filed an emergency motion for competency, citing your grief as a danger to the shareholders. He has witnesses lined up. The doctor who treated Martha, a nurse from the hospice, even a few of your neighbors. They are all claiming you have been erratic." "They are lying," I said, gripping the arms of the chair. "He paid them off, or he charmed them. Lucas could always sell ice to an Eskimo." "It does not matter if they are lying," Catherine said gently. "It matters what is on the record. And right now the record says you are unfit. But that is not the worst part." She pulled a document from the bottom of the stack and slid it across the desk toward me. It was a power of attorney form. It gave Lucas full, unrestricted control over my personal assets and my voting rights in the company. "Look at the date," she said. I put on my glasses. The date was stamped clearly at the top. March 12th. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands started to shake, rattling the paper against the desk. March 12th. I knew that date better than my own birthday. "I did not sign this," I whispered. "It is your signature, Harrison," Catherine said, pointing to the scrawl at the bottom. "Or at least a very good copy of it. It is notarized." "It is a forgery," I shouted, slamming the paper down. "It is a lie." "Do you know what I was doing on March 12th? That was the day Martha died. I was at the hospice center from 4 in the morning until midnight. I was holding her hand when she took her last breath at 3 in the afternoon. I did not leave her side. I did not sign papers for Lucas. I was watching my wife die. The room fell silent. The cruelty of it washed over me. Lucas had not just forged my name. He had forged it on the day his mother died, knowing I would be too broken to notice, knowing I would have no alibi because I was drowning in grief. He had used my tragedy as his opportunity. "We can prove it," Patty said, her voice trembling with rage. "We can get the hospice logs. We can get the security footage." "It will take too long," Catherine interrupted, her voice grim. "The merger with Apex is scheduled to close in 48 hours. If we file a motion to contest the signature, Lucas's lawyers will bury us in continuances. By the time a judge actually looks at the evidence, the company will be sold, the assets liquidated, and the money moved to offshore accounts. Bennett Logistics will be gone." I sank back into the chair. So that is it. He wins. He steals 40 years of work with a pen stroke and a lie. Catherine did not answer. She stood up and walked to a filing cabinet in the corner. She pulled out a thick, dusty binder. It was the original incorporation documents for Bennett Logistics. My father's name was on the first page, but the amendments were all mine. "There is always a loophole," she muttered, flipping through the pages. "You were paranoid in the 90s, Harrison. You didn't trust the digital transition. You didn't trust boards. You wanted absolute control. I was protecting the company," I said defensively. "I wanted to make sure no one could sell it out from under me." She stopped flipping. Her finger rested on a paragraph near the back of the binder. She read it silently, her eyes widening. Then she looked up at me, a slow, sharp smile spreading across her face. "Harrison," she said, "do you remember the 1995 amendment, specifically the clause regarding the transfer of intellectual property and brand identity?" I frowned, searching my memory. That was 25 years ago. We were expanding. I was worried about corporate raiders. I wrote in a poison pill. "Not just a poison pill," Catherine said, tapping the page. "A deadlock. Listen to this. Any sale, merger, or transfer of the Bennett Logistics brand logo or operating license requires the physical application of the founder's seal. This seal must be verified not by signature, but by the biometric imprint of the sitting chairman." I stared at her. The memory came rushing back. It was a piece of technology I had bought from a military contractor in Germany, a heavy titanium stamp with a built-in fingerprint scanner. It was ridiculous, really. Overkill. But I was proud of it. I wanted to ensure that literally only my hand could sign away the company. "That clause is still active?" I asked. "It was never revoked," Catherine said. "Lucas probably does not even know it exists. He is looking at digital records, board minutes, bank accounts. He is not reading the dusty, physical bylaws from 20 years ago." "So what does this mean?" Patty asked, leaning forward. "It means," Catherine said, closing the binder with a snap, "that the contract Lucas is about to sign with Apex is worthless without that seal. If he signs it, the sale is void. But if we have the seal, if we can produce it and prove he does not have it, we can prove he does not have the authority to sell. We can stop the merger cold." I felt a spark of hope, hot and bright. But then reality crashed back down on me. "The seal," I said, my voice dropping. "It is in the safe." "Which safe?" Catherine asked. "The wall safe in my study," I said, "behind the portrait of Martha. I haven't opened it in 10 years. "In the house," Patty whispered. "The house Monica is currently renovating. The house they kicked me out of, I finished. The house with the new locks, the new security system, and the son who thinks I am a dangerous lunatic. If Lucas finds that seal," Catherine said, "he will destroy it. Or worse, he will try to bypass the scanner. We need that physical object, Harrison. It is the only thing that proves you are the chairman. It is the only thing that overrides his power of attorney. Without it, we are just shouting at the wind." I looked at the window. It was getting dark. The rain had started again. I thought about the house I built. I knew every inch of it. I knew the creak on the 3rd step. I knew the code to the back gate. But more importantly, I knew something Monica and Lucas didn't. I knew about the ventilation shaft in the wine cellar. I had built it myself when I was terrified of tornadoes in the 80s. It was a narrow, dirty crawl space that led directly from the garden to the basement. I stood up. I buttoned my mismatched shirt. I adjusted the collar of the cheap jacket Patty had found for me. "I have to go back," I said. "Harrison, no," Patty said, grabbing my arm. "It is too dangerous. If they catch you, they will arrest you. They will say you broke in to hurt them. It will prove everything they are saying about your mental state." "Let them try," I said, feeling the old strength returning to my limbs. That is my house. That is my seal. And I am not going to let them sell Martha's legacy for gambling money. Catherine looked at me. She didn't try to stop me. She reached into her drawer and pulled out a small burner phone. "Take this," she said. "If you get the seal, call me. I will have the state troopers ready. But Harrison, if you get caught, I cannot help you. You will be a trespasser in your own home." I took the phone. I looked at Patty, then at Catherine. "I won't get caught," I said. "I am a truck driver. I know how to navigate a difficult route. And tonight, I am taking the most important delivery of my life." I walked out of the office and into the night. I had no weapon. I had no team. Just a 70-year-old body fueled by rage and a memory of a ventilation shaft that hadn't been opened in 30 years. I was going home. I sat in the passenger seat of Patty's old sedan, the engine off to keep us unnoticed. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the air heavy and cold. We were parked down the street from my house, hidden behind a thick hedge of overgrown lilacs that my neighbor, old Mrs. Gable, never bothered to trim. Patty handed me a pair of binoculars. They were heavy old military surplus, the kind I used to take birdwatching on Sunday mornings. Now I was using them to spy on the ruins of my own life. Through the lenses, the house looked the same, yet completely alien. The brickwork I had pointed myself 30 years ago was still strong. The porch swing where I proposed to Martha was still there, swaying gently in the wind. But the soul of the house was gone. It had been replaced by noise and destruction. A yellow bulldozer was parked on the front lawn, its treads tearing deep gouges into the grass. I watched as a man in a neon vest swung a sledgehammer against the stone retaining wall of the garden. My heart seized in my chest. That was Martha's rose garden. She had planted those bushes the year Lucas was born. For 38 years, she had pruned them, fed them, and covered them against the frost. They were her pride. They were the first thing she showed anyone who visited. I watched, helpless, as the man hooked a chain around the base of the oldest rose bush. The bulldozer revved, a cloud of black smoke puffing into the evening air. The chain went taut. With a sickening, tearing sound, the bush was ripped from the earth roots and dragged across the mud like a corpse. I lowered the binoculars, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold them. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and angry. It wasn't just landscaping. It was violence. Monica wasn't just renovating. She was erasing us. She was scrubbing Martha from the face of the earth to make room for a vanity project. Patty reached over and squeezed my arm, her silence offering the only comfort she could give. "Look," she whispered, pointing toward the driveway. I raised the glasses again. A car was pulling up to the gate. It wasn't a contractor's truck. It was a silver Mercedes, flashy and aggressive, with tinted windows and custom rims. The gate swung open, accepting a code I didn't know. The car rolled up the driveway and stopped right in front of the bulldozer. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. He didn't look like a logistics executive. He looked like a billboard for bad money. He wore a suit that was too tight and too shiny, the fabric shimmering under the security lights. Heavy gold chains hung around his neck, resting against a black dress shirt unbuttoned halfway down his chest. He had a thick diamond watch that caught the light every time he moved his hand. It was Victor Krell's right-hand man. I recognized him from the few times I had the displeasure of dealing with Apex at industry conferences. They called him the Fixer. His real name was Eddie, but nobody used it. He handled the things Apex didn't want on paper. The front door of my house opened. Lucas stepped out. He looked smaller than I remembered, his posture hunched. His movements jerky and nervous. He wasn't wearing a tie. His shirt was rumpled. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. Monica followed him out, holding a glass of wine, gesturing at the destruction of the garden, as if she were directing a symphony. I adjusted the focus on the binoculars. I needed to see their faces. I needed to see the fear. Lucas walked down the steps to meet the man in the silver suit. They didn't shake hands. The man Eddie leaned against the hood of his car, crossing his arms. He said something to Lucas, his expression bored, arrogant. Lucas flinched. He looked around nervously, scanning the street, scanning the trees. He looked right at the hedge where we were hiding, and for a second I stopped breathing. But he looked away. He didn't see his father. He only saw shadows. Lucas reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a thick manila envelope. It was bulging. He handed it to Eddie. The man didn't open it. He just weighed it in his hand, a smirk spreading across his face. He tapped the envelope against his other palm, a rhythmic, threatening gesture. I rolled down the window just a crack. The wind was blowing toward us, carrying the sound of their voices. It was faint, distorted by the distance, but I could hear them. "Is it all there?" Eddie asked, his voice carrying a rough, gravelly edge. "Yes," Lucas replied. His voice was higher than usual, strained. "Every cent. Just tell Victor we are on schedule for the signing." "Victor does not care about the signing." Eddie laughed, tucking the envelope into his car through the open window. "Victor cares about the inventory. We have a special shipment coming in tonight. Truck 404. Is it ready?" Lucas nodded frantically. "It is ready." I cleared the manifest myself. "No logs, no GPS tracking. It is a ghost truck just like you asked." "Good," Eddie said, stepping closer to Lucas, invading his personal space. "Because I do not want any surprises, Lucas. I do not want to see any flashing lights. If the cops smell anything on that truck, the deal is off. And you know what happens to people who waste Victor's time." "I promise," Lucas stammered, taking a step back. It is clean. The driver is loyal. He will take the back roads. Clean, Eddie repeated, mocking him. He looked over at Monica, who was watching them with a bored expression, swirling her wine. You tell your wife to keep the noise down. The neighbors talk. We do not need attention right now. He got back into the Mercedes, slammed the door, and reversed down the driveway without looking back. Lucas stood there for a long time, staring at the taillights, looking like a man standing on the edge of a cliff. I sat back in the seat, letting the binoculars drop into my lap. The reality of what I had just heard washed over me like ice water. It wasn't just a merger. It wasn't just about selling the company to a rival. It was smuggling. Lucas wasn't just incompetent. He was a criminal. A ghost truck. No logs, no GPS. That meant only one thing in our industry. Illegal cargo, drugs, weapons, stolen goods. Apex was using my trucks, my reputation, and my safety rating to move contraband across state lines before the company even officially changed hands. They were using Bennett Logistics as a mule. If that truck got stopped, it wouldn't just be a fine. It would be federal prison. The company would be seized, the assets frozen. Everything I built, everything Martha worked for would be destroyed in a single traffic stop. Lucas was gambling with more than just money. He was gambling with my freedom because my name was still on the door. If the feds raided us tomorrow, they would come for the chairman. They would come for me. I looked at the house again. Monica was laughing at something, pointing at the hole where the roses used to be. Lucas walked back up the stairs, his head hanging low, a man defeated by his own greed. Patty looked at me, her face pale. Did you hear that? She whispered. Truck 404. That is the new rig. The long hauler. I heard it, I said. My voice was calm, but it was the calm of a man who has just loaded a gun. This changes the plan, Harrison, she said. The seal isn't enough. If we just stop the sale, Lucas still goes to jail, but the company gets dragged down with him. We need to prove he did this alone. We need to prove he was acting without your authority. I nodded. I knew what I had to do. I didn't just need the biometric seal from the safe. I needed evidence. I needed to know what was on that truck, and I needed proof that Lucas ordered it. I needed to catch them red-handed. Start the car, Patty, I said, reaching for the door handle to close it properly. Where are we going? She asked. We are going to get some coffee, I said, staring at the darkened windows of my former home. And then I am going to wait for the storm. Because tonight I am breaking into that house, and I am not leaving until I have the power to send my son to prison. The ride back to Patty's shed was silent. The plan was forming in my mind, precise and dangerous. I knew the ventilation shafts. I knew the codes. I knew where the bodies were buried because I had built the cemetery. Lucas thought he was playing a game. He didn't know he was playing against the architect. Tonight, the old man was coming home, and he was bringing hell with him. Scene 7, The Break-In, Part 1. The storm arrived exactly as the forecast predicted, a violent, thrashing beast that battered the trees and turned the sky a bruised purple. Thunder rolled across the estate, shaking the ground with a force that vibrated through the soles of my cheap shoes. It was the perfect cover. Nature was screaming, and I intended to slip in through the noise. I stood at the edge of the property near the old retaining wall that Monica hadn't destroyed yet. The rain was torrential, washing away the mud from my earlier trek, but soaking me to the bone again. I didn't feel the cold this time. I was burning with adrenaline. I skirted the perimeter, staying low, moving from shadow to shadow, like a ghost haunting his own life. My target wasn't a window or a door. It was a patch of overgrown ivy near the foundation of the east wing. I pushed the wet vines aside, thorns scratching at my hands, until my fingers brushed against cold, rusted metal. The storm cellar doors. I had built this entrance in 1995 after a tornado tore the roof off a warehouse 3 counties over. It was reinforced steel designed to withstand the apocalypse. It led directly into the wine cellar, bypassing the main alarm grid. Monica had spent $50,000 upgrading the security system with cameras and motion sensors, but I knew her. She hated the basement. She called it a dungeon. She wouldn't have set foot down there to change a mechanical lock she probably forgot existed. I knelt in the mud, my knees protesting with a sharp, grinding agony. I wiped the rain from my eyes and found the keypad. It wasn't digital. It was an old-fashioned push-button mechanical lock, heavy and stubborn. I prayed the grease hadn't seized up. I punched in the code. 1980. The year Jamal was born. I held my breath and turned the handle. It groaned a low, metallic screech that was instantly swallowed by a clap of thunder overhead. The latch gave way. I pulled the heavy door upward. It weighed a ton. My shoulders screamed, the muscles burning as I strained against the rusted hinges. I was 70 years old, not 20. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a warning drumbeat that I ignored. With a final heave, I opened it just enough to slide through. I slipped into the darkness, letting the door clang shut above me, plunging me into absolute suffocating blackness. I didn't turn on a flashlight. I didn't need to. I knew this tunnel by the smell alone, damp, earth-aged oak, and the faint, vinegary scent of old wine. I crawled on my hands and knees through the narrow access tunnel. The concrete was rough against my palms. Dust and cobwebs coated my face, sticking to the sweat on my skin. Every movement was a battle. My back seized up a spasm of pain that forced me to stop and gasp for air. I bit my lip until I tasted copper, forcing myself to keep moving. I imagined Lucas sitting in my chair. I imagined Monica laughing at my roses. That anger was the only fuel I had left. I reached the inner door that opened into the wine cellar. This was the moment of truth. If they had put a sensor here, the alarm would trip and the police would be here in 5 minutes. I placed my hand on the knob. It turned silently. I pushed it open an inch. No beeping. No flashing red lights. Just the quiet hum of the climate control unit. I slipped inside, standing up and stretching my aching spine. The cellar was dimly lit by the ambient light of the security system panels on the far wall. I saw rows of expensive vintage wines bottles I had saved for special occasions, now gathering dust. I moved silently across the stone floor, avoiding the squeaky grate in the center. I reached the stairs leading up to the main floor. This was the most dangerous part. I climbed the wooden steps, placing my feet on the edges, where the wood was strongest and least likely to creak. At the top of the stairs, I cracked the door open. The hallway was empty. The house was dark, save for the lightning flashing through the windows, illuminating the changes Monica had made. The warm yellow wallpaper Martha loved was gone, replaced by a cold, sterile gray. The antique side table was missing. It felt like walking into a stranger's house that had been built on top of my memories. I crept down the hallway, my heart in my throat. I was heading for the study, my sanctuary. I passed the kitchen and saw the remnants of a party, empty wine bottles, half-eaten trays of catering. They were celebrating. The thought made my jaw tighten. I reached the double doors of the study. They were closed. I turned the handle and slipped inside, closing the door softly behind me. The room smelled of leather and stale cigar smoke. Lucas. He had been smoking in here. Martha never allowed smoking in the house. I moved to the large oak desk, navigating by the flashes of lightning. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Heavy pacing footsteps directly above my head. The master bedroom. Lucas was awake. I froze, holding my breath, my eyes fixed on the ceiling. The floorboards creaked. He was walking back and forth, a nervous walk. The walk of a man who knew he was walking on a tightrope. I waited until the footsteps moved away toward the bathroom before I moved. I walked to the fireplace. Above the mantel hung a large oil painting of Martha. She was smiling, wearing her blue Sunday dress. Even in the dark, I could feel her eyes on me. "I am sorry, Martha," I whispered silently. "I am sorry they turned our home into this." I reached behind the frame, my fingers searching for the hidden latch. I found it. I pressed it, and the painting swung outward on hidden hinges, revealing the steel face of the wall safe. This was it. If Lucas had changed this combination, it was over. But Lucas was lazy. He was the kind of man who used his birthday for every password. But this safe, he probably hadn't even cracked it yet. He probably didn't know the combination. It was the date I started the company. I spun the dial. Right to 4, left to 1, right to 5. The mechanism clicked, a soft, distinct sound that felt like a gunshot in the quiet room. I pulled the handle, pulled the vone. The heavy steel door swung open. I reached inside, my hand shaking uncontrollably. My fingers brushed against stacks of old papers, deeds, and passports. And then I felt it, the cold, heavy metal of the biometric seal. I pulled it out. It was heavy, made of machined titanium, cold and solid in my hand. I stared at it in the gloom. This small object was the most powerful weapon in the room. With this, I could freeze the sale. I could lock the assets. I could prove that I, and only I, was the chairman of Bennett Logistics. I shoved the seal into my jacket pocket, feeling its weight against my ribs. I had what I came for. I needed to get out. I needed to get back to the tunnel before the storm passed, and I lost my cover. I closed the safe and swung the painting back into place. I turned to the door, my hand reaching for the knob. But then a sound stopped me dead in my tracks. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't the wind. It was a shout, a loud, angry shout coming from upstairs. "You are a coward, Lucas," it was Monica's voice. It was muffled by the floorboards, but the shrill rage was unmistakable. I stopped. My hand hovered over the door handle. I should leave. I had the seal. Every second I stayed was a risk. If they came downstairs, if they saw me, it would be a disaster. But then I heard Lucas yell back, his voice cracking with panic. "They are squeezing me, Monica. You do not understand. If that truck does not move tonight, they are going to kill me." I froze. My feet felt rooted to the expensive Persian rug. That truck. He was talking about the ghost truck, the smuggling run. I took my hand off the door handle. I stepped back into the shadows of the room. This wasn't just a marital spat. This was a confession. I needed to hear this. I needed to know exactly how deep the rot went. I moved toward the ventilation grate in the corner of the study, the one that connected directly to the ductwork running under the master bedroom floor. I knelt down, pressing my ear against the cold metal grill. I wasn't leaving. Not yet. I needed ammunition, and my son was about to give it to me. The hallway was quiet, save for the rhythmic drumming of rain against the roof, but inside the linen closet, the air was thick with the scent of lavender and betrayal. I pressed myself against the shelves, burying my face in a stack of Martha's folded quilts to muffle the sound of my own ragged breathing. My heart wasn't beating. It was crashing against my ribs like a trapped bird. Just above me, through the thin plaster of the ceiling, the argument in the master bedroom had shifted from shouting to a terrified, hushed intensity that was infinitely worse. "You do not get it, Monica." Lucas hissed, his voice vibrating through the floorboards. "Victor Krell called me himself. He said if truck 404 does not leave the depot tomorrow night, the merger is dead. He said he will burn us down. He knows about the gambling debts, Monica. He knows everything." "Good," Monica replied. Her voice was icy, devoid of fear, the voice of a woman who had long ago traded her soul for a balance sheet. "Let him threaten you. Maybe it will finally make you act like a man instead of a frightened child. Move the shipment, Lucas. Drive the truck yourself if you have to." "I cannot drive it." Lucas sounded like he was on the verge of tears. "It is packed with pharmaceuticals, Monica. Illegal opioids. If I get pulled over, I go to federal prison for 20 years. I am not a mule. I am a CEO. You are a broke gambler who owes $2 million to the wrong people, Monica snapped. The sound of a sharp slap echoed through the house, a vicious, meaty sound that made me flinch in the darkness. Do not hit me, Lucas whimpered. Then stop acting like a coward, she hissed. We need that $50 million from Apex. We need it to pay off your bookie and clear my credit cards before the audit. We are at the finish line, Lucas. Do not ruin this because you are scared of a little traffic stop. I am not scared of the traffic stop, Lucas said, his voice trembling. I am scared because this is all happening too fast. Dad is gone. Mom is dead. It feels cursed. Oh, grow up, Monica scoffed. It is not cursed. It is managed. We did what we had to do, Lucas asked, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried perfectly in the silence of the house. We forged Dad's signature. We threw him on the street. That is bad enough. But Mom, sometimes I think, you think what Monica challenged him. I think it was too convenient, Lucas said. She was stabilizing Monica. The week before she died, Dr. Evans said her vitals were improving. He said she might have another 6 months, and then suddenly she is gone in a night, and you were the only one with her. In the closet, I stopped breathing. My hands gripped the fabric of the quilt so hard my fingers went numb. I had asked myself the same question 1,000 times in the dark. Why did she go so fast? Why did she leave me when we were making plans for the spring? There was a long silence from the bedroom. Then Monica laughed. It was a low, chilling sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. You really are pathetic, she said. You want to know what happened. You want the truth. I want to know if my mother died of natural causes, Lucas whispered. She died because she was in the way, Monica said. Her voice was flat, matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing a dinner reservation. She was lingering, Lucas. And as long as she was alive, Harrison was strong. He was focused. He was never going to sign that power of attorney while she was holding his hand. We needed him broken. We needed him grieving and confused. So I helped nature along. I felt the blood roar in my ears, the world tilted on its axis. What did you do? Lucas asked, his voice barely audible. I told Dr. Evans. She was in agony, Monica said. I told him the current dose was not working, that she was crying out in her sleep. He is a soft-hearted fool. He authorized a triple dose of morphine to keep her comfortable. I administered it myself. She did not feel a thing, Lucas. She just went to sleep. And the next morning, your father was a wreck, just like we needed him to be. Don't look at me like that. I did it for you. I bit down on the back of my hand. I bit down until the skin broke and the salty taste of blood filled my mouth. I had to stifle the scream that was tearing at my throat. It was a primal animal sound of pure agony. Martha. My Martha. She wasn't sick. She wasn't ready to go. She was murdered. She was murdered by the woman standing in her bedroom, wearing her jewelry, drinking her wine. And Lucas? My son. He didn't scream. He didn't call the police. You killed her, Lucas stammered. I expedited the inevitable, Monica corrected him. And I did it for us, for this deal. So do not you dare stand there and tell me you cannot move a truck. I have done the heavy lifting. I got blood on my hands so you could be rich. Now go down to the depot and make sure that shipment leaves tomorrow night. Or so help me God, Lucas. I will tell the police you were the one who mixed the dose. I fumbled for the burner phone in my pocket. My hands were slick with sweat and blood. I needed to record this. I needed to make sure the world heard what I just heard. I pressed the button, my thumb slipping on the plastic. The recording light blinked on. Say it again, Lucas whispered. Say you won't turn me in. Move the truck, Monica said. And we are partners. Fail, and you are the son who killed his mother for inheritance money. Who do you think they will believe, the grieving daughter-in-law or the degenerate gambler? I have it, I thought. I have them. But the rage was quickly replaced by a cold, deadly clarity. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was the witness. I was the judge. And I was going to be the executioner. I waited until I heard Lucas stomp out of the room and slam the bathroom door. Monica turned on the TV, the sound of a late-night talk show filling the void. I slipped out of the closet. I didn't go back to the study. I went straight for the back door in the kitchen. I didn't care about the alarm anymore. I didn't care about the noise. If they saw me, I would kill them with my bare hands. It was better to leave. I unlocked the back door and stepped out into the rain. The storm had passed, leaving behind a cold, wet silence. I ran. I ran through the mud, through the ruined garden, past the hole where the roses used to be. I clutched the phone to my chest like a holy relic. I reached Patty's car parked down the street. I threw the door open and collapsed into the seat, gasping for air, shaking violently. Harris and Patty asked, terrified, "You are bleeding. Your hand." "They killed her, Patty." I wheezed, the tears finally spilling over. "They killed Martha. Monica overdosed her. I have it on tape." Patty's face went white. She grabbed my good hand. "Oh, dear God." "Drive," I said, staring at the dark house that was now a crime scene. "Drive to Catherine's office. I am not just taking back the company. I am sending them to hell." Patty put the car in gear. As we drove away, I looked back one last time. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't grieving. The man who had walked into that house looking for a seal was gone. The man who drove away was a weapon. They wanted a war. They wanted to play games with lives. Well, tomorrow night, when they sat down to sign their deal, they were going to find out that the dead don't stay buried. And justice was coming for them, driving an 18-wheeler straight down their throats. The fluorescent lights of Catherine's office hummed with a low electric buzz that matched the tension in the room. It was 3 a.m. In the Pesa, the city outside was asleep, but inside these 4 walls we were preparing for an execution. Not a physical one, but a dismantling of lives so complete it would leave nothing but ash. I sat at the head of the conference table, my hands clasped in front of me to stop them from shaking. On the polished wood surface sat 2 objects: the heavy titanium biometric seal I had stolen from my own safe, and the cheap plastic burner phone containing the confession that would send my daughter-in-law to prison for the rest of her life. Catherine finished listening to the recording for the 3rd time. She took off her glasses and rubbed her face, her complexion pale and drawn. She looked at me, and for the first time I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Not fear of losing the case, but fear of the darkness we had just uncovered. "This changes everything, Harrison," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We are not just fighting a corporate takeover anymore. This is homicide. This is conspiracy." Monica confessed to overdosing Martha. "And Lucas, he is an accessory after the fact." I nodded slowly. I felt cold, a deep glacial numbness that had settled in my marrow. "I know," I said. "That is why we have to move now. We cannot wait for a grand jury. We cannot wait for an autopsy report. The signing ceremony is tonight. If Lucas signs those papers, Apex takes ownership. They will bury the evidence. They will launder the money. And Truck 404 will disappear into the distribution network before anyone thinks to look inside." Patty was sitting in the corner, clutching a mug of coffee. She looked older than I had ever seen her. The revelation about Martha had broken something inside her, too. They were friends for 30 years. "Harrison is right," Patty said, her voice trembling but firm. "We have to stop the truck. That is the leverage. If the FBI catches them trafficking narcotics on company property, the assets are frozen immediately. Lucas loses his immunity." Catherine picked up her phone. "I have a contact at the FBI field office in Columbus," she said. He owes me a favor. And the state troopers have been trying to pin Victor Krell for years. If I give them the route and the truck number, they will set up a dragnet. But Harrison, once I make this call, there is no going back. The feds do not play games. They will raid the building. They will arrest everyone in that boardroom. Make the call, I said. Catherine nodded and walked into the adjoining room to speak privately. I watched her go, then turned to the small bag Patty had brought in earlier. It contained the suit I had worn for my 40th wedding anniversary. It was a charcoal gray 3-piece suit tailor-made in Italy. Martha had picked it out. She said it made me look like a man who could move mountains. Patty had saved it from the pile of clothes Monica had designated for the dumpster. She had cleaned it, pressed it, and brought it here. I stood up, my joints popping, and picked up the bag. "I am going to get changed," I told Patty. I walked into the small restroom down the hall. The mirror was harsh, unflattering. It showed an old man with a week of white stubble, hollow cheeks, and eyes rimmed with red. I looked like the vagrant Lucas had tried to turn me into. I looked like a victim. I turned on the hot water and let the sink fill. I took the razor Patty had bought and lathered my face above. I began to scrape away the gray stubble. Stroke by stroke, the old man in the mirror began to fade. The jawline that emerged was sharper, set in a grim line. The eyes that stared back were no longer watery with grief. They were cold. They were hard. They were the eyes of the man who had built a logistics empire from the mud up. I washed my face with cold water, shocking the skin. I combed my hair back, slicking it down the way I had for 50 years. Then I opened the bag. I put on the white shirt, the starch stiff against my neck. I buttoned the vest. I stepped into the trousers. Finally, I shrugged on the jacket. It fit perfectly. It felt like armor. I adjusted my cufflinks' gold knots that Martha had given me for Christmas 10 years ago. I looked at myself one last time. Harrison Bennett, the chairman, was back. The homeless man who slept in a Motel 6 was gone. I wasn't just dressed for a meeting. I was dressed for war. When I walked back into the conference room, the silence was instant. Patty gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Catherine, who had just returned from her call, stopped mid-sentence. They stared at me, not with pity, but with something else. "Oh. You look like him," Patty whispered. "You look like the man who hired me in 1980. "I am him," I said. I walked to the table and picked up the biometric seal. I slipped it into my pocket. It was heavy, a reassuring weight against my side. Catherine looked at her watch. "The state troopers are setting up the roadblock on Interstate 71, she reported, her voice professional and crisp. "They are going to intercept truck 404, 10 miles outside the city limits. The FBI will be waiting at the warehouse. We have a 2-hour window before the signing ceremony begins at the headquarters." "Good," I said. "We are going to the headquarters. I want to be there when they put the pen to the paper. I want Lucas to see me." Catherine hesitated. She bit her lip, looking at the floor for a second, before meeting my gaze. She walked around the desk and stood in front of me. She placed a hand on my arm, a gesture of concern that felt genuine. "Harrison," she said softly, "we have the evidence. We have the police. You do not have to be in that room. You do not have to watch them put handcuffs on your son." I looked at her, keeping my face impassive. I needed to be stone. I needed to be steel. "I do have to be there, Catherine." "But he is your son," she pressed, searching my eyes for some flicker of hesitation, some sign of the father who had raised a boy, taught him to ride a bike, paid for his college. "Are you sure you want to do this? Once those doors open, his life is over. He will go to federal prison for 20 years. Monica will likely face the death penalty or life without parole. You are destroying your own family." I reached up and adjusted my tie, tightening the knot until it was perfect. I thought about the rain on the side of the road. I thought about the $40 in my wallet. I thought about Martha alone in her bed, trusting the woman who murdered her. I thought about Lucas standing in the rain telling me to get out of the car because I was inconvenient. I looked Catherine dead in the eye. The father in me had died in that muddy quarry. The man standing before her was just a CEO liquidating a bad asset. He died the moment he'd left me on the side of that road, I said, my voice as cold as the grave. Now I am just taking out the trash. I turned and walked toward the door, my dress shoes clicking rhythmically on the hardwood floor. Catherine and Patty grabbed their briefcases and followed. The sun was coming up over the city, casting long, bloody shadows across the skyline. It was going to be a beautiful day for a reckoning. The boardroom on the top floor of Bennett Logistics was a monument to corporate excess, a glass-walled aquarium floating above the city skyline. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and the dry, crisp smell of money. A magnum of Dom Perignon sat in a silver ice bucket, condensation weeping down its sides, waiting to christen the death of my legacy. Lucas stood at the head of the long mahogany table. He looked terrible. His skin was the color of old parchment drawn tight over his cheekbones, and his eyes were darting around the room with a frantic, drug-addled energy. He was sweating despite the aggressive air conditioning dabbing at his upper lip with a cocktail napkin. He held a crystal flute of champagne in a hand that trembled so violently the liquid threatened to spill over the rim. Beside him, Monica was a vision of triumphant malice. She had shed her mourning black for a dress of screaming scarlet silk that clung to her body like a second skin. She leaned back in my chair, the chairman's chair, swirling her wine with a look of utter satisfaction. She wasn't grieving. She was glowing. She looked like a queen who had just successfully poisoned the king and was waiting for the crown to be lowered onto her head. Around the table sat the legal team from Apex Corporation. They were a pack of wolves in Italian suits leaning back with relaxed, predatory smiles. At the far end sat the man I assumed was Victor Krell's proxy, a thick-necked man with a gold watch that cost more than my house. They were all waiting for the ink to dry, waiting for the transfer to clear, waiting to carve up 40 years of my blood, sweat, and tears. To the future, Lucas stammered, raising his glass. His voice cracked high and thin. To new beginnings, and to Bennett Logistics joining the Apex family. The lawyers murmured their assent, raising their glasses in a lazy toast. The crystal clinked, a cheerful sound that felt like a bell tolling for a funeral. Monica smiled, bringing the glass to her lips, her eyes fixed on the contract that lay open in the center of the table. That was the moment I chose to kick the door in. I didn't knock. I didn't use a key card. I hit the double oak doors with the flat of my hand, throwing them open with a crash that echoed like a thunderclap. The sound shattered the polite atmosphere of the room instantly. Every head snapped toward the entrance. I stood in the doorway, framed by the light of the hallway. I was leaning heavily on a black cane I had borrowed from Patty's husband, my right knee throbbing with a fiery pain from the break-in the night before. But I didn't look weak. I stood tall, my spine straight, wearing the charcoal suit that fit me like armor. My hair was slicked back, my face freshly shaven and set in a mask of cold, hard fury. Behind me stood Catherine Ross, clutching a briefcase like a weapon, her face grim. And beside her was Patty Higgins, the woman Lucas had fired 5 years ago, looking at him with the judgment of God in her eyes. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. It was a vacuum sucking the air out of the lungs of everyone present. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the wet bar. You could hear the traffic far below. Lucas dropped his glass. It hit the table, shattering instantly. Champagne sprayed over the legal documents, soaking the contract in frothy golden liquid. He didn't even notice. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a hook. His face went from pale to a sickly gray. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. "Dad," he whispered the word, strangled. "How? You are supposed to be..." Dead, I finished for him, my voice booming across the room. I didn't shout. I didn't have to. The acoustics of the room carried my voice to every corner. Or just gone. Which one were you hoping for, son? Monica scrambled out of the chair, knocking it over. The red wine in her glass sloshed onto her dress, staining the silk like a fresh wound. She stared at me, her eyes wide with shock. But then her expression hardened. She looked at my cane, at the two women behind me, and realized I wasn't just wandering in. I was invading. Security! Lucas screamed, his voice breaking into a hysterical shriek. He scrambled backward, putting the table between us. Call security! Get him out of here! He is crazy! He is violent! I stepped into the room, the rubber tip of my cane thudding heavily against the floor. Thud. Step. Thud. Step. I walked straight toward the head of the table. The Apex lawyers shrank back in their chairs, unsure of what was happening, but sensing the violence radiating off me. I stopped 10 feet from Lucas. I looked him up and down, taking in the fear, the sweat, the pathetic weakness of the man I had raised. You can scream all you want, Lucas, I said calmly, but nobody is coming to help you. Why? Monica hissed, finding her voice. She pointed a manicured finger at me, her face twisting into a mask of ugly rage. We pay them, they work for us, get out. Harrison, you have no right to be here. I turned my gaze to her. It was a look of such intense loathing that she actually took a step back. They do not work for you, Monica, I said. They work for Bennett Logistics and the head of security, old Mr. Henderson. I hired him 20 years ago when he came back from the Marines. I paid for his daughter's surgery when his insurance wouldn't cover it. I set up his pension fund. I took another step forward. When I walked into the lobby 5 minutes ago, Mr. Henderson didn't ask for ID. He didn't ask for an appointment. He shook my hand. He held the elevator door for me. Because he knows exactly who built this building, and he knows exactly who signs the checks that actually matter. Lucas was shaking his head, backing away until he hit the window. No, this isn't happening. You are incompetent. We have the papers. You are sick, Dad. You need to leave. The man with the gold watch, the Apex representative, finally stood up. He was a big man, used to intimidating people, used to getting his way. He smoothed his tie and looked at me with a sneer of amusement, as if I were an interesting interruption to his business deal, a fly to be swatted away. This is very touching, really, he said, his voice oily and deep. A family reunion. Very dramatic. But I am afraid you are confused, old man. He picked up a soggy document from the table, shaking the champagne off it, with a dismissive flick of his wrist. We are in the middle of a closing, he said, walking around the table to stand between me and Lucas. And according to this power of attorney signed and notarized, you have absolutely no authority here. You are a guest, a trespassing guest. He smirked, leaning in close, smelling of expensive tobacco and arrogance. So why don't you take your little fan club and shuffle back to the nursing home? Your son has already signed the preliminary agreement. This company belongs to Apex now. You are just a ghost haunting a building you used to own. I looked at him. I looked at the document in his hand. And for the first time in months, I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf watching a lamb walk into a trap. Is that so? I asked softly. I reached into my pocket. My fingers closed around the cold, heavy metal of the biometric seal. Then I suppose it is a good thing I brought my own stamp, I said. Because you are about to find out that a signature is just ink, but a legacy that is written in stone. And you, sir, are standing on a trapdoor. I pulled the heavy titanium seal from my pocket and slammed it onto the mahogany table. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot, making the crystal glasses jump. I did not wait for the shock to wear off. I looked at the Apex representative whose smug smile was faltering for the first time. You want to talk about authority, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Let us talk about the 1995 corporate bylaws. Clause 4, Section 2. No transfer of assets, brand identity, or operational control is valid without the biometric verification of the founder. That is me, and that stamp right there. That is the only thing that unlocks the company. Catherine stepped forward, slapping a thick folder onto the wet, champagne-soaked contract. And before you wave that power of attorney around again, you should know that we have already filed a motion of fraud with the state court. We have the hospice logs, Lucas. We have the security footage from the care center. You claim your father signed this document at 2 in the afternoon on March 12th. But the logs show Harrison was holding his dying wife's hand at that exact minute. He did not sign anything. You forged it. Lucas turned a sickly shade of green. He looked at the document, then at me, sweat beading on his forehead. That is a lie, he stammered, his voice thin and reedy. He signed it. He forgot. He is senile. The Apex representative was not looking at Lucas anymore. He was looking at the seal on the table and then at his own lawyers. One of the lawyers was frantically scrolling through a digital file on his tablet. He whispered something in the big man's ear. The man's face went dark. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. This deal is contingent on a clean title, he rumbled, glaring at Lucas. If there is a contest of ownership, we are out. We do not do messy. Sit down, Monica shrieked, slamming her hand on the table. Do not listen to them. We own the company. We are the majority shareholders. Harrison is just a ghost. We can override the seal. We can file an emergency injunction. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound that scraped my throat. You really do not get it, do you, Monica? You spent so much money, you bought so many clothes, but you never actually read the books. I walked around the table, leaning heavily on my cane until I was standing right behind Lucas. He flinched, shrinking away from me as if I were radioactive. Even if you had my signature, son, I said softly, leaning down so only he could hear the grit in my voice. Even if you forged it perfectly, even if the judge gave you everything you wanted, you still cannot sell Bennett Logistics to Apex. Why not? Lucas whispered, tears of panic welling in his eyes. Because you do not own it, I said, straightening up and addressing the room. Bennett Logistics, the entity Lucas runs, is an operating company. It holds the payroll, the insurance contracts, and the office lease. That is it. But the assets, the 300 trucks, the 5 million square feet of warehouse space, the land this building sits on, I paused, letting the silence stretch until it was painful. Those belong to the Martha Bennett Property Trust. I separated the assets 10 years ago to protect them from liability, and to protect them from people like you. The operating company leases everything from the trust, and the trust is irrevocable. The sole beneficiary upon Martha's death is not you, Lucas. It is the Bennett Foundation for Elder Abuse Prevention. The color drained from Monica's face so fast she looked like a wax doll. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The Apex representative let out a short bark of laughter. He looked at Lucas with pure contempt. You tried to sell me a shell, he spat. You tried to sell me a leasing company with no assets. You fraud. It is not true, Lucas screamed, standing up and knocking his chair backward. It is mine. It is all mine. It is over, Lucas, I said. You tried to sell the car, but you forgot. You do not own the engine. You are selling air, and nobody pays $50 million for air. The room erupted into chaos. The Apex lawyers were packing their briefcases, shouting instructions into their phones. The big man was yelling threats at Lucas, promising lawsuits that would bury him for 3 lifetimes. Monica was frozen, staring at the wall, her mind trying to comprehend that the fortune she had killed for had just evaporated into mist. But the chaos was cut short by a sound that made everyone freeze. Sirens. Lots of them. They weren't distant. They were right outside, screaming down the street, getting louder by the second. Blue and red lights began to flash against the glass walls of the boardroom, strobing like a disco in hell. Lucas ran to the window. Oh God, he moaned, pressing his hands against the glass. Oh God. Oh God. The double doors of the boardroom, which I had left open, were suddenly filled with uniforms. State troopers and gray FBI agents in windbreakers with yellow lettering. They poured into the room, weapons drawn, moving with the precision of a hammer strike. At the front of the pack was a man I recognized, Sheriff Miller. He looked at me and nodded once, a grim acknowledgement, before turning his attention to the head of the table. Lucas Bennett. He barked, his voice filling the room. "Put your hands on the table." Now. Lucas froze, trembling violently. He looked at me, his eyes wide with the terror of a child who had broken a window. But this was not a window. "What is this?" Monica shrieked, standing up. "You cannot be in here. This is a private meeting." "Monica Bennett, stay where you are," an FBI agent shouted, moving toward her. Sheriff Miller walked up to Lucas, pulled his arms behind his back, and slapped the handcuffs on. The metallic click was the loudest sound in the world. "Lucas Bennett, you are under arrest for federal drug trafficking and interstate commerce violations," Miller recited. "We intercepted truck 404 outside the city limits 20 minutes ago. It was carrying 50 kilos of fentanyl concealed in auto parts. The driver rolled on you, Lucas. He gave us the texts. He gave us the authorization codes." "No," Lucas wailed, struggling against the cuffs. "It was not me I was forced. They made me do it." He pointed a shaking finger at the Apex representative. It was him. The Apex man didn't even blink. He was already talking to his lawyer in a hushed tone. He knew how the game was played. Lucas was the fall guy. Lucas was the sacrifice. And Mrs. Bennett, another voice spoke up. A detective in a plain suit stepped forward, holding a plastic evidence bag containing my burner phone. "You are under arrest on suspicion of manslaughter and conspiracy to commit murder regarding the death of Martha Bennett. We have a recording of your confession." Monica let out a sound that wasn't human. It was a high, keen shriek of a trapped animal. She lunged at me, her red nails clawing at the air, her face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. "You old bastard," she screamed as the agents tackled her, pinning her to the expensive carpet. "You ruined everything. You should have just died." I watched them drag her away, her red dress bunched up, her heels kicking at the air. I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No joy. Just a deep, hollowing exhaustion. They marched Lucas past me. He was weeping openly now, snot running down his face, his legs dragging on the floor. He stopped when he got to me, the deputies pausing for a second. "Dad," he sobbed, his voice broken and pathetic. "Dad, please. You cannot let them take me. I am your son. I am sorry. I will fix it. Just tell them. Tell them it was a mistake. Help me, Dad." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had thrown my luggage into the mud. I looked at the man who had gambled away his mother's legacy while she lay dying. I looked at the man who had left me to freeze on the side of the road. I leaned in close, so close I could smell the fear sweating off him. My son died the day he left me in that quarry. I said, my voice steady and cold as ice. "You are just a stranger who broke into my house." I turned my back on him. "Dad!" He screamed, the sound echoing down the hallway as they dragged him out. "Dad," I did not turn around. I did not look back. I stared out the window at the city below, at the flashing lights reflecting off the wet pavement. It was done. The war was over. The enemy was vanquished. But as the room emptied out, leaving me alone with the silence, I realized that victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like survival. And now, for the first time in 40 years, I had absolutely no idea what to do next. The first thing I did was sit down. Not in the chairman's chair that Monica had defiled, but in a simple folding chair against the wall. The adrenaline that had sustained me for 48 hours left my body all at once, leaving behind a bone-deep ache. The room was a disaster zone. Overturned chairs, spilled champagne, and the lingering scent of expensive perfume mixed with the sweat of fear. "Mr. Bennett." I looked up. It was Henderson, the head of security. He was standing in the doorway, his cap in his hands, looking at me with a mixture of respect and worry. Behind him stood a dozen employees, secretaries, junior analysts, janitors, people who had been cowering in their cubicles while the raid went down. "Is it true?" Henderson asked quietly. "Is Lucas gone?" "He is gone," I said, my voice rasping. "They are all gone." Henderson nodded slowly. He walked into the room, stepped over the puddle of Dom Perignon, and extended a hand to help me up. "Then I am awaiting your orders, sir. Welcome back." The next few weeks were not the triumphant return of a king. They were a demolition project. I didn't go back to the Motel 6. I slept on the leather couch in my old office, waking up at 5:00 a.m. to start the purge. I didn't just fire the Apex sympathizers. I scorched the earth. I brought in forensic accountants to hunt down every dime Lucas had siphoned off. We found hidden accounts in the Cayman Islands. We found kickback schemes with maintenance vendors. Every discovery was another knife in my back, another proof of how long my son had been rotting from the inside out. But the hardest part wasn't the business. It was the house. Once the crime scene tape was removed, I went back to the estate. It was silent. The bulldozers were gone, leaving the garden a scarred, muddy pit. Inside it smelled of Monica, her cloying air fresheners masking the scent of the home I had built. I walked through the rooms like a stranger. I saw the empty spaces where my antique clocks used to be. I saw the modern, soulless art she had hung on the walls. I went to the master bedroom. The bed where Martha and I had slept for 30 years was gone, replaced by a California king with silk sheets. I couldn't even look at it. I went to the closet. Monica had packed my things in garbage bags, but she hadn't touched Martha's side. Not out of respect, but out of laziness. I spent 3 days there. I folded Martha's sweaters. I boxed up her books. I found the scarf she wore on our honeymoon and pressed it to my face, inhaling the faint, fading scent of her lavender soap. I cried then. Not for Lucas, not for the company. I cried for the life that was truly over. I realized then that I couldn't live here. This wasn't a home anymore. It was a museum of a tragedy. That was when I called the real estate agent. "Sell it," I told him. "Sell it all. The furniture, the chandeliers, the cars. I don't want the money. Give it to the hospice. I just want it gone." When I walked out of that front door for the final time, I didn't look back. I locked the door, dropped the keys in the mailbox, and felt a strange weight lift from my shoulders. I was homeless again, but this time it was by choice. I was stripping down the armor, preparing for the only journey that mattered. The visitation room was not quiet. It was a cage of echoing screams and the heavy metallic clank of chains. I sat in booth 4, my hands folded on the cold steel ledge, watching the door. When it buzzed open, 2 guards dragged Lucas in. He wasn't walking. He was being hauled like a sack of garbage. He looked feral. The prison barber had shaved his head, revealing a scalp covered in stress rashes. His eyes were bloodshot, darting around the room as if he expected a knife in his back. When he saw me, he didn't just sit. He slammed himself against the plexiglass, his breath fogging the barrier. "Dad!" He screamed, his voice raw, shredding the air. "Dad, you have to get me out. They know. They know who I am." I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just leaned forward, invading his space from the other side of the glass. "Who are you, Lucas?" I asked, my voice a low rumble. "Are you the CEO, or are you the inmate in cell block D?" "Stop it," he hissed, glancing terrified at the inmates on either side of him. "Listen to me, the Apex deal, the drugs, I can explain. I was the middleman. I can roll on them, I can give you names. Victor Krell, the suppliers, everyone. Just get me a lawyer who isn't a public defender. Get me protective custody." I watched him unravel. It was fascinating in a gruesome way. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the primal fear of a prey animal. "I don't need your names, Lucas," I said coldly. "The FBI already has the laptop Monica tried to hide in the cistern. They have the ledgers. They have the emails where you authorized the shipment. You are not a witness, son. You are the target." Lucas went white. He clawed at the glass, his fingernails making a sickening, scratching sound. "Then help me," he begged, tears cutting tracks through the grime on his face. "Use the money, Alfred's money. I know you have it. By the judge, by the warden. I don't care, but just get me out of general population. They are going to kill me in here, Dad." I sat back, letting his panic wash over me. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a single folded piece of paper. I pressed it against the glass. It was a photocopy of the hospice log from the night Martha died. Lucas stopped screaming. He stared at the paper, his eyes widening until I thought they would split. "We need to talk about Mom," I said. He shook his head violently. No, we don't. That's irrelevant." "Is it?" I asked. "Monica is trying to cut a deal, Lucas. She is singing like a canary. She told the DA that you stood outside the bedroom door while she administered the overdose. She said you held the timer." "Liar," Lucas shrieked, slamming his fist against the glass so hard the guard stepped forward, hand on his baton. "She is a liar. I was downstairs. I was drinking. I didn't see anything." "But you knew," I said. The words were simple, heavy, final. "You knew she was walking up those stairs with a syringe. You knew your mother was helpless, and you stayed downstairs and poured yourself a drink because you wanted the inheritance faster." Lucas opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like a man drowning. The truth hung between us, heavy and suffocating. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. I needed the money," he whispered, the confession slipping out like a dying breath. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor, a sound like a gavel strike. "That is why you are going to rot in here, Lucas," I said. "Not for the drugs, not for the fraud, but because you sold your mother's life for a gambling debt. I am not spending a penny on your defense," I continued, my voice rising, drawing the attention of the entire room. "The $32 million, I am donating it. All of it. To the District Attorney's Special Task Force on Elder Abuse Prosecution. I am funding the very people who are going to put you away forever." Lucas slid out of his chair, falling to his knees on the dirty floor. "Dad, no you can't. I am your flesh and blood." "My blood doesn't run in your veins anymore," I said, turning my back on him. "You drained it all out." "Guard," I called out, not looking back. "I am done with this prisoner." As the heavy steel door buzzed open to let me out, I heard Lucas screaming. It wasn't a word anymore. It was just a sound of pure animal terror. "Harrison." I walked into the corridor, the heavy thud of the door cutting off his scream like a guillotine. I adjusted my cuffs. I checked my watch. I had a meeting with the architects for the new hospice wing in an hour. I felt lighter than I had in 20 years. The tumor was gone. The body could finally heal. 6 months is a long time to wait for silence. For half a year, my life was filled with the noise of lawyers, the flash of cameras, and the endless drone of court proceedings. But this morning, as I sat in the fast of the courtroom, the only sound that mattered was the sharp, final crack of the judge's gavel. It was the sound of a book closing. It was the sound of an ending. I looked at the back of Lucas's head one last time. He had lost weight in county jail. His expensive haircut was gone, replaced by a buzz cut that showed the shape of his skull. When the judge read the sentence, Lucas did not scream. He did not cry for his father. He just slumped forward, his forehead touching the table as if the strings holding him up had finally been cut. 20 years. Federal prison. No possibility of parole for at least 15. The drug trafficking charges stuck, but it was the conspiracy to commit fraud that buried him. He would be an old man when he walked free. He would be older than I was when he threw me out of that car. Monica took it differently. She stood rigid, her face a mask of stone as the judge delivered the verdict for second-degree murder. The jury had not believed her story about mercy killing. The toxicology report and my recording proved malice. It proved greed. Life in prison. The judge cited the financial motivation as a heinous, aggravating factor. As the bailiffs led her away, she did not look at me. She did not look at Lucas. She stared straight ahead into a future that was now just a concrete wall. I walked out of the courthouse and took a deep breath of the crisp Ohio air. It was over. The cancer that had rotted my family from the inside out had been surgically removed. But I did not feel triumphant. I felt light. I felt untethered. I did not go back to the mansion. I had sold the furniture, the art, and the expensive decorations Monica had bought. I donated the proceeds to the hospice center that had cared for Martha. The house itself, the brick and mortar shell, remained in the trust, generating income that would now go to protecting seniors who had been discarded by their families. Instead, I drove to the industrial park where Bennett Logistics had its main depot. The sign out front still bore my name, but today the ownership was changing hands for good. I walked into the break room where 50 of my oldest employees were waiting. Mechanics, drivers, dispatchers. Men and women who had given me 20, 30 years of their lives. Patty stood at the front of the room holding a stack of binders. She was smiling a real, genuine smile that made her look 10 years younger. Beside her was Catherine, who had drafted the most important contract of my career. I cleared my throat and the room went quiet. I told them that Bennett Logistics was never meant to be a dynasty for a spoiled prince. It was built on sweat and diesel. I told them that as of this morning, I had transferred 100% of the operating company's stock into an employee stock ownership plan. I am not your boss anymore, I said, looking at Henderson, the security guard who had let me in on that fateful night. You are the bosses. You own the trucks. You own the contracts. You own the profits. There was a stunned silence followed by a roar of applause that shook the windows. I saw grown men wiping their eyes. I saw hope returning to faces that had been worried about layoffs and mergers. I kept the land, of course. The trust would act as their landlord, charging a fair rent that would go directly into the Hector Vance Foundation. It was a perfect circle. My father's legacy would fund the future, and my employees would secure their own retirements. I shook every hand. I hugged Patty and Catherine, and then I walked out the back door. Parked in the loading bay was my ride. It was not a limousine. It was not a luxury SUV. It was a 1995 Ford F-150 Candy Apple Red with a dent in the rear bumper from a loading dock accident in '98. I had restored it myself on weekends years ago. It smelled of old leather oil and hard work. I opened the passenger door and whistled. A golden retriever with a gray muzzle hopped out of Patty's car and scrambled into the truck. Buster, Martha's dog. He had been staying with Patty since the funeral, confused and lonely. When he saw me, his tail thumped a rhythm against the seat that sounded like pure joy. Hey, buddy, I whispered, scratching him behind the ears. You ready to go for a ride? I climbed into the driver's seat. The engine turned over with a reliable, throaty rumble. I didn't look back at the office. I didn't look back at the city skyline. I put the truck in gear and headed west. I drove for an hour, leaving the suburbs and the strip malls behind, until the road turned from asphalt to gravel. The trees closed in skeletal branches now covered in the lush green leaves of summer. I knew this road. I knew every pothole and curve. I slowed down as I approached the old quarry. The mud was dry now. The gloom of that rainy afternoon was replaced by bright golden sunshine that filtered through the canopy. I pulled over onto the shoulder exactly where the Lincoln had stopped 6 months ago. I turned off the engine. The silence was absolute, save for the chirping of crickets and the wind in the grass. It was peaceful. I opened the door and stepped out, my boots crunching on the gravel. I walked to the edge of the road and looked down into the ditch where Lucas had thrown my bag. It looked different in the light. It wasn't a place of death anymore. It was just a place. I walked back to the truck bed and pulled out a small wooden stake and a hammer. I had painted a sign on a piece of reclaimed barnwood. It wasn't for anyone else. It was for me. It was a marker, a tombstone for the man. I used to be the man who was blind to the rot in his own house. I knelt down and hammered the stake into the earth right where I had stood in the rain with $40 in my pocket. I stepped back and read the words I had painted in white. Where a new life begins. I stood there for a long time, letting the sun warm my face. I thought about the anger that had fueled me for 6 months. It was gone. I had used it all up. All that was left was a quiet, steady hum of freedom. I was 70 years old. I had no job. I had no house to maintain. I had no family drama to manage. I had a truck. I had a dog. And thanks to my father, I had enough money to go wherever the road took me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded map of the United States. Martha had bought it 3 years ago. She had circled Yellowstone National Park in red ink. We kept saying we would go next summer, next year. When things slowed down, I traced the red circle with my thumb. "We are going, Martha," I said to the wind. "We are finally going." I climbed back into the truck. Buster barked, eager to get moving. I put the map on the dashboard right next to the picture of my father standing in front of the textile factory. I looked at him one last time. He was smiling. I put the truck in drive. The gravel crunched under the tires as I pulled back onto the road. I didn't turn around to look at the sign. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I just looked forward through the windshield at the endless ribbon of road stretching out toward the horizon. The sun was high. The tank was full. And for the first time in a very long time, I was driving my own vehicle on my own route toward a destination of my own choosing. I pressed the gas pedal, and Harrison Bennett drove away into the rest of his life. 2 weeks later, the air changed. It wasn't heavy with the humidity of Ohio or the weight of betrayal anymore. It was crisp smelling of pine needles and ancient sulfur. I parked the Ford near the edge of the Grand Prismatic Spring in Yellowstone. The steam rose up in thick white clouds, painting the sky with colors Martha would have loved, deep azures and fiery oranges. I lowered the tailgate and sat down, pouring a cup of black coffee from a thermos. Buster hopped up beside me, resting his heavy head on my lap, watching a bison graze in the distance. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Patty back home. The Hector Vance Foundation just approved its first grant. The message read, "We are providing full legal defense for a 60-year-old widow being evicted by her stepchildren. We got her Harrison." I looked at the screen and smiled. My father's money, the fortune Lucas had killed for, wasn't just sitting in a bank accumulating dust. It was fighting. It was a shield for people who had no one else. I realized then that Lucas was wrong about one thing. He told me I was at the end of the line. But looking out at the wild, untamed beauty of the park, I knew I was just at the beginning. The betrayal didn't kill me. It pruned the dead branches so something new could grow. I have a full tank of gas, a loyal dog, and a righteous mission. The road is long, but for the first time in my life, I am not in a rush. I am just living. And that is the sweetest revenge of all. Harrison's story is a powerful testament that integrity is the only true asset that can never be stolen. He didn't secure his victory solely through a hidden seal or a sudden inheritance. He won because he spent a lifetime cultivating loyalty with a security guard, a young lawyer and a stranger in a bar 60 years ago. While his son sold his soul for quick cash, Harrison understood that money is merely a tool, not the destination. Never underestimate the power of quiet preparation and a kind heart, for they are the ultimate weapons to dismantle even the cruelest betrayals. Do you believe in karma the way Harrison proved it exists? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe right now so you never miss the next story of sweet revenge and life lessons. See you next time.